All right, I'd like to invite Dr. Lester Merklin up for our next section on cultural awareness. You've heard a little bit from Dr. Obi. Dr. Merklin was actually Pastor Merklin to me many years ago. I attended Blue Mountain Academy. Do we have anyone here from BMA? No, Pennsylvania. It was BMA North. I got here and learned there was BMA South. Bass Memorial Academy. But he was my chaplain in high school and went on to serve as the president of Institute of World Missions, which was then based at Andrews University, now is out of the General Conference. But I really appreciate his experience in sharing with cultural sensitivity.
Thank you. This will work. No, I don't have any. Hi. I come with a little bit of trepidation here today because culture is a big item. How many of you have never been outside the United States? Anybody? Have you ever heard the term ugly American? It used to be thrown out a lot more than it is these days. But actually, when we were doing the Institute of World Mission, when we were doing the institutes with General Conference missionaries that would go out, we had a book that was titled Ugly American, Ugly Korean. Because ugly American idea had been so prevalent, and somebody in Korea decided they needed to write to let Koreans know when they go to other countries, they can be seen as ugly Koreans. And the whole idea, of course, is we're used to our culture. And Americans have been traditionally known to be pretty good at taking their culture with them and surprised that nobody else does it right like they do. Yeah? I really appreciate what Dr. Brahm shared earlier today, and I'm excited for you guys. The book you're got and the E-class, take it seriously. Really, when I would talk with student missionaries or with our career missionaries, I've always thought that not being prepared, trained, culturally sensitive hurts the missionary and it hurts the field you go to. Okay? So, what do we do in a half hour with culture? First of all, I haven't been to Uganda. I've been to Kenya many times, spent several weeks in Kenya, so I know a little bit about what you're handling. And I've been on the Amazon 10 days, but most of that was in the city, and only 3 days actually out in the boat on the water. So I really don't know the exact culture. In other words, I can't tell you today exactly the cultural issues that you will enter in some cases. Some cases I can, and I will mention those. But basically, I just want to share some ideas for you to keep in your mind as you go to learn, as you learned in the first session, right? We're there as learners. We're there to understand them and their culture and support them and enjoy them. But having a little idea of how to watch for cultural differences is important. It's so sad to me in my travels. You know, I have a million frequent flyer on Deltas, so you can see I had to travel a lot in my jobs with the General Conference. But I enjoy getting to know other cultures, and it's always embarrassing to me when I was on a flight in the Middle East or in Asia and I could pick out the Americans. Okay, so I jotted myself some notes because I wanted to make sure that I could share with you as much as I could of my week's curriculum on culture in just a half hour. So first of all, everyone belongs to a group that has a culture. It's a given. I had one member of my church in Massachusetts that said, "You talk about culture. You know, culture, the only culture Ellen White talks about is being cultured." Well, poor lady, I can tell you other stories. But yeah, we have culture. Culture is good because we live in a wicked world. Every culture has some bad, including yours and mine, right? So everybody's got a culture out there. It's the way they do things. We're human. What is culture? Were you born with a culture? Anyone here born in Tennessee? Do you have a genetic Tennessee culture? I was born in Oregon. Do I have a genetic? No. Cultures are learned. Every one of us, our cultural and our society, our culture, our group is learned. From the day you're born, you start learning what works, what doesn't in that society, in that culture. And our parents make sure they help us, and our teachers and our peers and our experiences, everything goes toward our learning our culture. And most of it we don't even stop to think about, correct? We just do it. We don't stop and think when we walk into an elevator, now how do I act in an elevator? We don't get in the car to drive and say, which side of the road shall I drive on? It's just things that we do. Because we learned it. That's our culture, and every culture is that way in their own self. And by the way, a local culture is not just the way we do things. Almost everybody's culture is right, the best, because that's what they've grown up in, correct? And so when we go to Brazil, or we go to Kenya, or we go to Uganda, or wherever we go, we have to keep in our mind that they have a culture that they automatically thinks it's the right way to live, right? Just like we think our culture is the right way to live. Now, there's always outliers, and I happen to be one that rebels a little in culture, and maybe you do too. But the fact is, most of what we do and think and act is based on our culture, even though we might rebel against parts of it. Which brings up the idea of subcultures. Someone said today to me in the sponsors meeting before, because I said I hadn't been to Uganda. And we had to admit to each other, Uganda isn't one culture. Kenya is not one culture. I've been in Nairobi and I've been on the coast, which is mainly Muslims. Quite a bit different culture. The United States, I just moved down here 2 years ago from Michigan to Tennessee. There's a difference. So there are subcultures. And that means that even if you go to a book and read about Brazil, it won't tell you what the people really have as a culture in the villages along the Amazon. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that one village's culture will be different from the next, correct? So that's why we have to get that attitude of watching, thinking, learning from them, because no one's going to teach us ahead of time everything about that culture. Cultures are good. I really enjoy cultures. At my age, the long flights are getting longer and longer, but getting to these various cultures. My wife and I were just in India in December. Love getting back to the subculture since we spent 6 years in Pakistan. So it was neat getting back there and eating real food 3 times a day, Enjoy the culture you go to. Don't criticize it. When we went to the Philippines, where I was a missionary for several years, one of the people that we rode into the city with, because we didn't have a car yet, every time he would make comments on our way to the city. I don't know why these people do this. I don't know why these people do this. Luckily, that was before I became director of the Institute of World Mission, or I might have started training him on the spot. Enjoy the cultures because they are different and they have good points. I've learned things. I really wish I was Asian in more ways than I am. In Pakistan, my wife would go to the market, and they have a stand. This guy has the wheat and the other grains and the nuts, and somebody else has other things. and she would go to this place to get her flour and things. And so she would walk in and say, "Good morning, 2 kilos of that, 1 kilo." And the guy would say, "How you doing? How's your son Paul?" And my wife, I remember one time, said, "Oh, that's right, we're supposed to be friendly first." Most cultures are better than that than we are. We tend to get down to business, right? Yeah, we weren't a culture. Don't judge the culture you're going to. Please hold that on. We all as human beings have a natural tendency to judge the cultures. And we can't do it quickly. And by the way, 10 to 14 days is quickly. So try not to judge the cultures. Face it, even Adventists in different cultures will have different cultures. Got it? On IS campus in the Philippines, the Filipinos, trained by an old-time American missionary as well, and Sabbath had the list of don'ts. The Koreans were playing soccer on Sabbath afternoon. And I'm not here to discuss what I think one should do. The fact is, Adventist cultures are different. And when we're only there 10 to 14 days, our job isn't to judge their culture. I've trained student missionaries for almost 20 years now. You guys that go as student missionaries from Southern, you've got your own training. Walla Walla has their own training. But a lot of volunteers don't have a local place they do training. So I have an online course since 2007 that has been training student missionaries. And it's been interesting to watch. Number one, I want to say is 99% of student missionaries preparing to go as student missionaries are fabulous people. They're going with good hearts and good minds and good spirits and understanding that they need to learn cultures. But once in a while, I remember one Asian that said, "I'm going to be assistant dean in Scandinavia for the year, and one of the things I'm going to accomplish is to teach them what's the right length of dresses to wear as a Christian." From Asia, they're going to go up there. No, that's not their job. A Westerner, which I do not remember which country now, had already in their mind as they were getting ready to go to Asia, what's one of the things they're going to do? They're going to help them realize that it's wrong for chickens and dogs to be walking through their open-air churches on Sabbath. No, let's not judge somebody else's culture. As you can imagine, I have a lot more stories that I like to tell. So let's get down to some basic cultural things, okay? Ways of greeting. That's not going to be such a big thing to most of you in Africa, because they have incorporated many of the same things. They'll shake hands with you, for instance. But you know, different places in the world have different ways of greeting. How they greet you, how they don't greet you, what they do. You know, you've got the bowing, you've got the handshakes. In Pakistan, they put their hands on their heart, assalamu alaikum, and so forth. So you can quickly watch and see how comfortable they are with different types of greetings. If I was showing my PowerPoint today, I've got a perfect picture of an Arab leader, I don't remember which one it is, kissing George Bush on his cheek. I don't know what he thought, but that was a nice greeting, one that we're not usually used to. Taboos. Every culture has taboos. You know that word? Don't. And some of them may seem really silly to us, but we need to be observant and sharing with our local hosts and finding some of those taboos and just stay away from it. We can last 14 days without doing whatever it is that we don't. Taboos. You may be from different cultures. Brazil, again, I don't know if on the Amazon, but my good friend, colleague at the mission department of Andrews, he's a Brazilian, and he's always, yes, So thumbs up is fine, but it isn't in every culture. In Brazil, there's another sign that we do, A-OK, that you do not do in Brazil. You're shaking your head? I could tell you a really good story about that one, but this does not mean A-OK in Brazil, at least in the European background Brazil. Again, I don't know amongst the tribes along the Amazon. But every place you go, the cultures are going to have some taboos or some ways, symbols that mean something different. Just be conscious and try to watch and learn. And usually your host, if not your sponsor, will tell you about some of these on the place you are going. But in case you're wondering, this means the same as, I can't do it. But it means the same as somebody might do if you cut them off in traffic in America. That symbol, that's the same. This one's interesting, space. I don't know if you've noticed that, but if you're around any Latinos, have you ever noticed they tend to stand close to you as they talk? And our tendency is to start backing up. Don't. If you're in a culture that is a close space and you tend to be a little distance, for 10 to 14 days, let it be. Because you know what it's going to look like. They're not going to understand because they haven't thought of culture. It's going to look like their breath smells, or you really don't like them, etc. So we have to watch those things. Space, time. I heard your sponsors this morning, and I know when they say the bus is leaving at 10, that means it means 10, yeah. In Amazon on the tribes, so in other words, you're going to have to be one thing in your group and just live with the other thing in the other groups. I mean, I've been to weddings that started at 4:30 when it was announced to start at 1 in the United States because it was people from Pakistan. And I had a part in the wedding and I wasn't sure, is this going to be Pakistan time or American time? In fact, Pakistan Standard Time is thought of as flexible time. Oh my, gender roles. Again, you're going to have to be observant. It's going to be different than your gender roles, but it's going to be different in each of these cultures you're going to. And when I say gender roles, I mean in several different ways. Yes, how you interrelate with different gender, and you've got to watch it just from the fact that you may feel very comfortable as an American going there, male and female, with certain ways you interact. You've got to be aware that the culture, it may appear to be different than you think. In Philippines, not Filipinos, from another country, the parents came to a missionary to talk to them about their 16-year-old son about the wedding. And they said, what? Well, the way he's been relating to my daughter, I thought that was the plan. No, it wasn't the plan. But anyway, we have to watch those things as far as the relationship amongst us, but also our relationships with them. Obviously, if you end up in Kenya in an area that's Muslim, then you have to really be careful, even the sponsors especially, but all of us, and that is, culturally, a male does not go up and initiate a conversation with the female. And definitely does not shake hands. It does not initiate shaking hands. Because you may actually be with someone who has seen groups from Southern or otherwise before, and so the female from the other side may come up and shake hands with them, but don't initiate it. But that's true of every culture. They're going to have some gender roles and how it relates, so watch it. And I can tell you this one thing. Those of you in Kenya, and I suppose it's somewhat the same in Uganda, but I do not know personally, but I think so, very patriarchal, very male-oriented, and that's something you just have to get in mind. I'm sorry, but you girls may not be able to have all your rights that we as Americans want you to have for 14 days. You may just need to watch it. And if you're in a position where you do need to share at the hospital or whatever, do it carefully, because the local Kenyan is not going to be used to be learning from the lady. It's a fact. But that shouldn't stop you from doing your job. Just do it carefully, remembering you're there to encourage and work with and watch to see how it's being taken. Dress is a cultural thing. Boy, is it a cultural thing. Even going from Philippines to Indonesia, I had to find my suit in the closet and get a tie. Because in Philippines, praise the Lord, we didn't have to. No ties. But to go to Indonesia, if I had dared go up on the pulpit without a jacket, or without, and not the tie, completely against the Adventist culture they learned from the Dutch missionaries. But your sponsor will talk to you about it. But I think as long as you're looking at this group, I'm sure you're careful with that. But it is something to keep in mind. And not just in the moral issues, just expectations. Food. You know, and I know that the food in these places are going to be different. I was in Ghana, and they had a student of Valley View College there, being the person who showed me around while I was there, because I was going to speak at a conference. And she took me to the cafeteria for lunch, and she said, okay, over here at that part of the counter, that's where you get your food. And I said, what are they serving over here? And she said, oh, that's our local food. I said, I come to Ghana, I want your local food. Oh, okay. And I said, what's there? And she said, well, here, well, she said first, she said, but we eat with our hands. We take the grain ball and put it in. I said, okay, I'll do that. You teach me how. And she said, over here is the okra, and over here is the beans. Oh, I'm glad I had a choice. I'll take the beans, thank you. But at least I joined in, and hey, there are going to possibly be times that for religious or health reasons, it's not what you're going to take. I've never drank alcohol in my life, and I don't think I'll start because I want to be a nice missionary. You know, there's certain things, and I hope you have some religious qualms on certain things, but you can do that carefully. I find that even Muslims, or especially Muslims, if they know it's a religious thing, they're with you, as long as they can see in everything else you do, you're trying to fit in, trying to be part of them, trying to understand their culture, respecting their culture, enjoying their culture, and then you say, you know, I just can't eat the pig. Of course, that's not a problem with Muslims. Luckily, that's what was nice about Pakistan. We didn't have to worry about lard being in anything. But whatever it might be, I find they're okay with you if they realize, and if it's an allergy, if it's a health thing, hey, you can let them be known. But I find traveling the world, you can usually eat without making any kind of noise about what you leave not on your plate, as much as you can. But please, don't use your own likes and dislikes to enter in. For 10 or 14 days, get to enjoy their food, or look like you enjoy their food. Of all the foods in the world, I have the hardest time with the vinegary, spicy Korean. But I made sure I had some each time. Give me Indian, okay? Communication. When we were called to go to Pakistan, it was from Blue Mountain Academy. I was sitting in my office, and who was my secretary? Anyway, secretary who had grown up in Africa as a missionary's kid. She was over there on the other side doing whatever I'd given her to do, and the phone rings, and they say, hey, we voted last night for you guys to go to Pakistan. Will you go? And I was silent for a little bit, and he laughs, the secretary of GC laughs, and he said, can I call you back tomorrow for an answer? Yes, please. And I hung up. Becky turns around in her chair and she said, was that your call to the mission field? She just caught it in there. But then we ask, do we get to learn Urdu before we go? Oh, no, you don't need that. Oh, don't believe it, you do need that. And my wife learned it well, and she to this day, when she goes to an Indian store, talks to them in Hindi, which is virtually the same thing, and their mouths drop open. I don't. I claim it's because I'm older, but it really was because I was teaching 22 credits a quarter from day one we entered Pakistan. You're not going to learn languages in 10 days or 14 days. Although the way I heard some of you learning people's names, I hate that game. But you learn it fast, you probably learn. Give my wife 2 or 3 weeks in a country and anyway. You won't learn, but if you can learn some phrases. I was on a flight from Lahore to Kuwait when I was back there, not when we lived there. And on that plane, 3 of the attendants, one was from Arab country, one was a Filipino, and anyway, as I went off the plane and they're saying thank you, I just said thank you to each of them in their language. And they just, I'm glad they didn't try to talk to me after that. But that helped because language is a key to culture. And if you could greet them, Assalamu alaikum, or whatever it is in the country you are, if you can say obrigado, thank you in Brazil, whatever. Those things are going to bring that fellowship and that connection with them. So try to do that as you pick up. Another thing to realize, and this one is important, especially when you go to Kenya. As a Nigerian told me, in Nigeria, we tell you what you think, what they think. When you go to Kenya, they're really nice and make you feel really comfortable and then tell each other what they thought afterwards. And that's not because they're greater sinners than you or I, it's because they're indirect culture. Which is kind of neat sometimes, but most of us from America, we'd like to hear what you really think. Tell me. Because we don't like that around the bush. I don't know what they are in the native villages of Brazil, but my guess is they're going to be much more indirect. So what do? 2 things. We make sure that we're careful not to be too direct when we don't need to be. With your own group, yeah, but with them, careful. Second is to try to learn to look beyond what is said and try to say, what are they trying to say? Just because they say to you, oh, thank you. This is something I really needed to know and I appreciate you. Maybe. And that's not going to say to them, hey, tell me the truth. No, don't do that. But just realize that and try to look beyond. Is there something that they wish I knew, but they don't feel comfortable telling me? And it's especially true because you're the guest. They can be a little more direct with people they've become friends with or in their own culture, even though they're indirect as a nature. They can be a little more direct when they know, but you're the important person. Don't feel over-important, but you are because you're the guest, and they're going to do very well at being indirect. Okay, just one story. Okay. In the Institute of World Mission, we would, after every 3 weeks' time, we as the faculty, we would talk about how things went, what we could do better, and we had a fun time together. But we realized, we need to have less lectures, and we really didn't do a lot of lectures. We would do some, but we had them in small groups, which I'd love to do with you, and I did with the student missionaries, where they think about it together, because you're as good at coming up with answers as I am when you think about it together. But we said we need to do some more case studies, some more illustrations of what we're doing. So the idea of what if two of us males, the Brazilian and I, would walk up to the front holding hands. I had no missionaries to Pakistan who to this day, after being there years, still think the policemen they met were gay. Because in Pakistan, the men hold hands sometimes. And they weren't gay, by the way. It's just what they did. So I thought, here's a real illustration that would hit these missionaries from everywhere, going to everywhere. And my Brazilian friend says, I ain't going to do it. Even though we all agreed we needed to do something. So when I was talking about the cultural thing that next day, or next institute, I decided I was going to do it up on my own. So I just turned to the table, where the various missionaries at the table, and I called this guy up. I said, come up here and help me with this. And he came up and I took his hand. And he took it, didn't have trouble. And you hear the giggle start to happen around the group. And as I say, they're from everywhere, because the institutes, you got Filipinos going to Africa, you've got Americans going somewhere, you've got European, anyway. They just started giggling. And so then, I think I dropped the hand. I mean, long enough's long enough. But then I explained, cultures have different ways, and we can't just judge them. We have to see what it means to them and enjoy their culture. Actually, I enjoyed holding hands one time. One of my colleagues in the Philippines, I was back there for annual council one year when they held it in Manila, and he was at the annual council too. And there was a time that we had enough time to go out, get a local bus up to the schools, just so I could say hi to my friends at the school and so forth. And he took my hand as we walked to the bus. My first thought was, the second thought was, hey, I obviously have made myself a friend in this culture. So it was good. But anyway, I finished my little spiel with this fellow beside me, and I said, thank you for helping me and being such a good sport. And he said, thank you for letting me take a part. And he leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. He said, now I got you, didn't I? Well, turns out he was from Spain and his wife's from Italy. Watch, observe, learn. But hey, don't be overly anxious. If they can see you love them, you're there to learn, you want to fit in and mingle with them in their culture as much as you can, when you make a mistake, they'll forgive you.